Have you ever had the feeling that the entire world was against you? Not as a figure of speech, genuinely. When your enemies were too powerful, your strength too small, and the way out simply did not seem to exist. When you scanned the horizon, and all you could see were closed-in, heavy clouds. David knew that place. He knew it very well. But what makes Psalm 18 extraordinary is not the description of the danger. It is what David does after coming out the other side. He does not write a survival manual. He does not claim credit for his own resilience. He sits down, looks back, and sings a love song. And that is exactly what we are going to study today. That song, that massive psalm, 50 verses deep, that walks through the darkest anguish and arrives at the most radiant doxology. We will do this guided by Charles Haddon Spurgeon's commentary in the Treasury of David, the most extensive work he ever wrote on the Psalms, and by one of his most beloved sermons, preached at the Metropolitan Tabernacle in 19th century London. Prepare your heart, because Psalm 18 is not only David's story, it is yours as well. Every great text begins before its first verse. And Psalm 18 begins with a title that is, in itself, already a sermon. It tells us that this is a psalm of David, the servant of the Lord, who spake unto the Lord the words of this song in the day that the Lord delivered him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. Notice what David does not mention in that title. He does not say, King of Israel and Judah. He does not celebrate the crown, the palace, or the military victories. He presents himself as the servant of the Lord, and nothing more. Spurgeon observes this with genuine admiration. David considered it a far greater honor to be the servant of the Lord than to be the king of Judah. And rightly so, he says. That already tells us a great deal about the spirit of everything that follows. This psalm is not the anthem of a man who lifted himself up. It is the song of someone who knows exactly to whom he owes everything he has. There is an important historical detail here. Psalm 18 appears in nearly identical form in 2 Samuel chapter 22. This led Spurgeon to conclude that David sang this song at different moments in his life, every time he looked back and reviewed his remarkable history, observing the gracious hand of God in all of it. It is as though every time life pressed the replay button on his memory, David heard the same melody. The Lord did this for me. And he would sing it again, with more gratitude, more depth, more maturity. Spurgeon called this psalm the grateful retrospect. It is the backward glance of a man who had lived much, suffered much, been saved many times, and who never allowed a single one of those deliverances to pass without praise. There is a theological detail of enormous importance that Spurgeon highlights right at the beginning. Verse 2 and verse 49 of Psalm 18 are both quoted in the New Testament, in Hebrews chapter 2 and verse 13, and in Romans chapter 15 and verse 9, as words spoken by the Lord Jesus himself. This means that underneath David's voice, there is a deeper voice. Spurgeon says it plainly, a greater than David is here. When you read about the cry in the storm, the deliverance from many waters, the praise among the nations, know that these words found their fullest fulfillment in the Son of David, the Messiah, who cried out to the Father in the darkness of Gethsemane, was rescued through the resurrection, and now proclaims the Father's name among his brothers. Keep that in mind as we study. This psalm is richer than it first appears. Before we enter the verse-by-verse exposition, let us read the entire psalm straight through. Do not rush. Let the images settle. Listen to the movements of David's soul, from anguish to prayer, from prayer to deliverance, from deliverance to victory, from victory to praise. I will love thee, O Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my strength, in whom I will trust, my buckler and the horn of my salvation and my high tower. I will call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised. So shall I be saved from mine enemies. The sorrows of death compassed me, and the floods of ungodly men made me afraid. The sorrows of hell compassed me about. The snares of death prevented me. In my distress I called upon the Lord and cried unto my God. He heard my voice out of his temple, and my cry came before him, even into his ears. Then the earth shook and trembled. The foundations also of the hills moved and were shaken, because he was wroth. There went up a smoke out of his nostrils, and fire out of his mouth devoured. Coals were kindled by it. He bowed the heavens also, and came down, and darkness was under his feet. And he rode upon a cherub, and did fly. Yea, he did fly upon the wings of the wind. He made darkness his secret place. His pavilion round about him were dark waters and thick clouds of the skies. At the brightness that was before him, his thick clouds passed, hailstones and coals of fire. The Lord also thundered in the heavens, and the highest gave his voice, hailstones and coals of fire. Yea, he sent out his arrows and scattered them, and he shot out lightnings and discomfited them. Then the channels of waters were seen, and the foundations of the world were discovered at thy rebuke, O Lord, at the blast of the breath of thy nostrils. He sent from above, he took me, he drew me out of many waters. He delivered me from my strong enemy, and from them which hated me, for they were too strong for me. They prevented me in the day of my calamity, but the Lord was my stay. He brought me forth also into a large place. He delivered me, because he delighted in me. The Lord rewarded me according to my righteousness. According to the cleanness of my hands hath he recompensed me. For I have kept the ways of the Lord, and have not wickedly departed from my God. For all his judgments were before me, and I did not put away his statutes from me. I was also upright before him, and I kept myself from mine iniquity. Therefore hath the Lord recompensed me according to my righteousness, according to the cleanness of my hands in his eyesight. With the merciful thou wilt show thyself merciful. With an upright man thou wilt show thyself upright. With the pure thou wilt show thyself pure, and with the froward thou wilt show thyself froward. For thou wilt save the afflicted people, but wilt bring down high looks. For thou wilt light my candle, the Lord my God will enlighten my darkness. For by thee I have run through a troop, and by my God have I leaped over a wall. As for God, his way is perfect. The word of the Lord is tried. He is a buckler to all those that trust in him. For who is God save the Lord? Or who is a rock save our God? It is God that girdeth me with strength and maketh my way perfect. He maketh my feet like hinds' feet, and setteth me upon my high places. He teacheth my hands to war, so that a bow of steel is broken by mine arms. Thou hast also given me the shield of thy salvation, and thy right hand hath holden me up, and thy gentleness hath made me great. Thou hast enlarged my steps under me, that my feet did not slip. I have pursued mine enemies, and overtaken them. Neither did I turn again till they were consumed. I have wounded them that they were not able to rise. They are fallen under my feet. For thou hast girded me with strength unto the battle. Thou hast subdued under me those that rose up against me. Thou hast also given me the necks of mine enemies, that I might destroy them that hate me. They cried, but there was none to save them, even unto the Lord, but he answered them not. Then did I beat them small as the dust before the wind. I did cast them out as the dirt in the streets. Thou hast delivered me from the strivings of the people, and thou hast made me the head of the heathen. A people whom I have not known shall serve me. As soon as they hear of me, they shall obey me. The strangers shall submit themselves unto me. The strangers shall fade away and be afraid out of their close places. The Lord liveth, and blessed be my rock, and let the God of my salvation be exalted. It is God that avengeth me, and subdueth the people under me. He delivereth me from mine enemies. Yea, thou liftest me up above those that rise up against me. Thou hast delivered me from the violent man. Therefore will I give thanks unto thee, O Lord, among the heathen, and sing praises unto thy name. Great deliverance giveth he to his king, and showeth mercy to his anointed, to David, and to his seed forevermore. Every great story begins before its first chapter. In the case of Psalm 18, it begins with a declaration that ought to be the foundation of every spiritual life. I will love thee, O Lord, my strength. This is not a request. It is not a conditional promise. It is an irrevocable declaration of love made before any crisis has arrived. And Spurgeon, commenting on verse 1, draws attention to the force of the Hebrew word used here. It is connected to the idea of deep visceral love, the love of a mother for her newborn child, instinctive and all-consuming. In his own words, with strong, hearty affection will I cling to thee, as a child to its parent, or a spouse to her husband. The word is intensely forcible. The love is of the deepest kind. That love does not rise out of nowhere. It rises from an encounter with who God truly is. And verse 2 gives us 7 names for God in swift succession, a cascade of revelation: rock, fortress, deliverer, God, the rock of strength, buckler, horn of salvation, high tower. 7 images of protection, each one distinct, none of them idle. Spurgeon points out that the word rock appears twice in that verse, but with 2 different shades of meaning. The first is a rock to hide in, like the caves of Judah where David once took shelter. The second is a rock to stand upon, firm, immovable, eternal. He concludes, quoting John Calvin, David here equips the faithful from head to foot with these 7 names. They are words worth committing to memory, especially on the days when the soul is surrounded. And then verse 3 resolves everything in a single golden sentence. I will call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised, so shall I be saved from mine enemies. The prayer is born out of praise, not desperation. David does not call upon God as though he were a vending machine for requests. He calls upon him as one who deserves to be praised, and that posture transforms the quality of every prayer that follows. Spurgeon captured this with precision. To be saved singing is to be saved indeed. Many are saved mourning and doubting, but David had such faith that he could fight singing and win the battle with a song still upon his lips. Before we move into the darkness that comes in the next block, pause here for a moment. How many of those 7 names in verse 2 have you come to know through your own experience? God as a rock? Has he been that solid ground for you? God as deliverer? Have you felt him intervening when you were cornered? The knowledge of God is not theory, it is lived history, accumulated in the memory of the heart. On the days when prayer feels difficult, return to verse 2. Read each of the 7 names slowly. Let every image do its work in your heart, and then say with David, I will call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised. The posture changes the inner state. We have just seen love declared. Now we are going to see where that love is tested. Verses 4 and 5 read like a corridor of terror. David piles up 4 metaphors of anguish in rapid succession. First, the sorrows of death compassed me, like a condemned man bound and waiting for execution. Second, the floods of ungodly men made me afraid, like a shipwrecked sailor being swallowed by the tide. Third, the sorrows of hell compassed me about, like an animal cornered by a pack of hunting dogs. Fourth, the snares of death prevented me, like a trembling bird caught in a net. Spurgeon sums it up this way: he was bound like a malefactor for execution, overwhelmed like a shipwrecked mariner, surrounded and standing at bay like a hunted stag, and captured in a net like a trembling bird. What more of terror and distress could meet upon one poor defenseless head? And here is something Spurgeon reveals with a rare and moving transparency. When commenting on verse 4, he pauses and writes in the first person. He recalls that on the night of the tragic accident at Surrey Music Hall, when a panic in the crowd caused deaths and the British press attacked him with cruelty, it was precisely this verse that described his own experience. And he adds, "What honey of goodness was extracted by our Lord out of this lion of affliction? Surely God hath heard me." This matters. This is not a distant commentator explaining someone else's suffering. This is a man who walked through the storm and found God on the other side. And he testifies, verse 6 happened. And verse 6 is the turning point of the entire psalm. In my distress I called upon the Lord and cried unto my God. He heard my voice out of his temple, and my cry came before him, even into his ears. Notice the progression within the verse itself. David first calls, then cries out. The intensity increases. The prayer does not weaken over time. It grows. And the 2 names used also grow in intimacy. First, the Lord, the covenant name, and then my God, the name of personal, intimate, possessive faith. Spurgeon uses an image that has stayed with readers of the Treasury ever since. Prayer is that postern gate which is left open even when the city is straitly besieged by the enemy. It is that way upward from the pit of despair to which the spiritual miner flies at once when the floods from beneath break forth upon him. And about the cry reaching God's ears directly, he adds something of great theological weight. The voice and the cry are themselves heard directly by the Lord, and not made to pass through the medium of saints and intercessors. There is no cue, there is no necessary middleman. A child's cry goes straight to the Father's ears. In Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 16, the writer invites us, "Let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. That invitation is cut from the same spiritual fabric as verse 6 of Psalm 18. Direct access to God is not a New Testament innovation without roots. It is the same reality David lived, confirmed, and enlarged in Christ. When life is stuck in verses 4 and 5, the biblical response is not silence or passive resignation. The response is verse 6, a growing cry with growing confidence. You do not need beautiful words. You need the right direction. And the direction is, my God. Now the psalm shifts into epic mode. David cries out, and God comes down. But the way God comes down is cosmic, breathtaking, almost overwhelming to describe. An earthquake in verse 7, smoke rising from God's nostrils in verse 8, the image of a warrior driven by righteous fury, moving at full speed, thick darkness forming in verse 9, a cherub as a heavenly chariot in verse 10, lightning, hailstones, and coals of fire in verses 12 through 14, and the very bottom of the sea laid bare in verse 15. A question presses itself forward. Why does David use such grand cosmic language to describe the deliverance of one man? The answer is embedded in the Psalm's own theology. When a child of God cries out, the creator of the universe sets the universe itself in motion. The scale is not disproportionate. It is revelatory. God does not ration his power when one of his own calls. Spurgeon sees this and writes about verse 7, "There was no great space between the cry and its answer. The Lord is not slack concerning his promise, but is swift to rescue his afflicted." And then, on verse 9, when God bowed the heavens also and came down. He adds something of immense pastoral comfort. Darkness is no impediment to God. Its densest gloom he makes his tent and secret pavilion. Take note of that. God does not need light to act. He acts in the dark. He acts when you cannot see a thing. He acts when the night is at its thickest. This is not vague poetry. It is practical theology. The absence of any visible sign of God's presence does not mean the absence of God. Verse 16 then brings the concrete deliverance after all the epic imagery. He sent from above, he took me, he drew me out of many waters. Spurgeon connects this with a beautiful image from the Old Testament. Here David was like another Moses, drawn from the water. And thus are all believers like their Lord, whose baptism in many waters of agony and in his own blood has redeemed us from the wrath to come. And then we reach verse 19, the verse Spurgeon called the foundation of all mercy. He brought me forth also into a large place. He delivered me because he delighted in me. The reason for the deliverance is not David's merit. It is not his sufficiently eloquent prayer. It is not the sheer intensity of his cry. It is God's sovereign pleasure. He delighted in David. And that delight, unearned, unconquered, entirely free, is the bottom of every well of mercy. Spurgeon writes with a depth worth keeping. After pining a while in the prison house, Joseph reached the palace, and from the cave of Adullam, David mounted to the throne. Sweet is pleasure after pain. And then he drives the point home. If we go deep enough, sovereign grace is the truth which lies at the bottom of every well of mercy. In Romans chapter 8 and verse 32, Paul asks, "He that spared not his own son, but delivered him up for us all, how shall he not with him also freely give us all things?" The argument is the same as verse 19 of Psalm 18. The God who delights in his child does not stop halfway. He goes all the way. This block is for anyone in the middle of a storm who cannot see the way out. The cosmic language here is not literary decoration. It is a deliberate reminder of who is fighting for you. The God who shook mountains for David's sake is the same one who heard your cry last night. And he is coming down. David claims that the Lord rewarded him according to my righteousness, verse 20, that he kept the ways of the Lord, verse 21, and that he remained upright, verse 23. To many modern readers, this sounds like spiritual arrogance. It sounds like someone claiming salvation by personal merit. But Spurgeon dismantles that reading with clarity and precision. He explains, the dispensations of divine grace are sovereignly free and entirely independent of human merit. However, in the realm of providence, there is frequently a rule of equity by which the wrongfully accused are ultimately vindicated. David was being slandered by Saul. The charges were false, and in asserting his integrity, he is not claiming perfection before God. He is claiming honesty before his accusers. He knows little of the sanctifying power of divine grace, Spurgeon writes, who is not at the bar of human equity able to plead innocence. There is no self-righteousness in an honest man knowing that he is honest. But it would indeed be self-righteousness, he continues, to transfer those thoughts from the realm of providential government into the spiritual kingdom. For there, grace reigns not only sovereignly but exclusively. In other words, David is not saying he deserved salvation. He is saying that God, who sees everything, vindicated his integrity against the false accusations of his enemies with providential justice. Then comes verse 22. And here Spurgeon delivers one of the most memorable lines in the entire Treasury. Backsliders begin with dusty Bibles and go on to filthy garments. It is the briefest of sentences, yet it maps an entire trajectory of spiritual decline. Neglect of the word precedes corruption of conduct, always. The dusty Bible is the first symptom. The visible sins are the consequence. Verses 25 and 26 introduce a principle of divine moral symmetry. With the merciful, God shows himself merciful. With the pure, pure. With the froward, froward. It is the same principle Paul expresses in Galatians chapter 6 and verse 7. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. Spurgeon cautions, however, that this does not mean God becomes corrupt in his dealings with the corrupt. It means that the obstinate man encounters the righteous opposition of God, who refuses to bend his holiness to accommodate rebellion. And then the block closes in verse 28 with one of the most beautiful images in the entire psalm, "Thou wilt light my candle." Spurgeon's comment is unforgettable. Candles which are lit by God the devil cannot blow out. That is consolation. That is pastoral theology at its finest. You may be in a season where your candle seems extinguished. The evidences of grace are dim, faith is wavering, joy has gone quiet. But if God lit that flame, it does not go out with the enemy's wind. Two practical applications grow from this block. First, if you are being slandered and holding to your integrity, this block offers genuine comfort. God sees and God acts. Second, the sentence about dusty Bibles is an invitation to an honest self-examination right now. When did you last open the Word with a real intention to hear from God? After all the retrospection, the cry, the theophany, the integrity vindicated, David turns his face toward the battle and says, "For by thee I have run through a troop, and by my God have I leaped over a wall." This is not boasting, it is a declaration of dependence in the language of the warrior. Spurgeon observes that the two prepositions in that verse carry all the weight. By thee I have run through a troop, by my God I have leaped over a wall. Every act of courage has a return address. God's warriors may expect to have a taste of every form of fighting, he says, and must by the power of faith determine to quit themselves like men. But it behoves them to be very careful to lay all their laurels at Jehovah's feet. Verse 30 is the anchor of the entire block. As for God, his way is perfect. The word of the Lord is tried. He is a buckler to all those that trust in him. Spurgeon writes, "Far past all fault and error are God's dealings with his people. All his actions are resplendent with justice, truth, tenderness, mercy, and holiness. Every way of God is complete in itself, and all his ways put together are matchless in harmony and goodness." That is the theological anchor of every courageous action in the Christian life. I do not trust my feet because they are swift. I trust them because God made them like the feet of deer. Verse 33. I do not trust my hands because they are skilled. I trust them because God taught them for war. Verse 34. I do not trust my endurance because I am strong. I trust it because God himself girded me with strength. Verse 32. Every piece of the armor is attributed to God. That repetition is not accidental. It is a theology of dependence written in the grammar of gratitude. And then we reach verse 35, the verse Spurgeon loved so deeply that he preached an entire sermon on it, entitled Divine Gentleness Acknowledged, delivered at the Metropolitan Tabernacle. Thou hast also given me the shield of thy salvation, and thy right hand hath holden me up, and thy gentleness hath made me great. In that sermon, Spurgeon explores the various possible renderings of the Hebrew word used here, kindness, providence, condescension, humility, and concludes that all of them point to the same truth. David ascribes all his greatness not to his own goodness, but to the goodness of God. And then Spurgeon says something that few who have read it ever forget. We are so little that if God should manifest his greatness without condescension, we should be trampled under his feet. But God, who must stoop to view the skies and bow to see what angels do, bends his eye yet lower and looks to the lowly and contrite and makes them great. Sit with that. Whatever is genuinely real in you spiritually, whatever lasting good is there, is not the product of your discipline, your spirituality, or your faithfulness. It is the product of the condescension of God, who came down to where you were and lifted you up. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 9, Paul receives this divine answer, "My grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness." The principle of verse 35 is present here as well. The power of God is displayed precisely where human weakness openly confesses its limit. In which battle are you currently trying to leap the wall in your own strength? Verse 29 invites you to change one word in your prayer, from "I will manage" to "by my God, I will manage." This is not a denial of human action. It is the alignment of dependence before the action begins. We have reached the end of the psalm, and the end is not a conclusion. It is an eruption. The Lord liveth, and blessed be my rock, and let the God of my salvation be exalted. 3 exclamations in sequence. It is as though all the held-in weight of the psalm, the full burden of the storm, the theophany, the battle, and the victory, releases all at once into praise. David does not end with a careful, measured reflection. He ends singing at the top of his voice. And that praise does not stay within the borders of Israel. Verse 49 projects David's voice far beyond the boundaries of the chosen people. Therefore will I give thanks unto thee, O Lord, among the heathen, and sing praises unto thy name. The personal deliverance of one man has universal reach. The testimony of someone drawn out of many waters is meant to be carried to the nations. Spurgeon highlights something of the greatest importance. Verse 49 is quoted by Paul in Romans chapter 15 and verse 9 as words spoken by Christ himself. The same Jesus who cried out to the Father in the darkness of Gethsemane, who was drawn out of many waters in the resurrection, is the same one who now praises the Father's name among the Gentiles, in precise fulfillment of this single line from David. And the psalm closes in verse 50 with a word that, in Hebrew, carries the full weight of a millennia-old promise. Great deliverance giveth he to his king, and showeth mercy to his anointed, to David, and to his seed forevermore. That word anointed in Hebrew is Mashiach, Messiah. David is, consciously or not, catching a glimpse of someone greater than himself. The seed of David in whom divine mercy abides forevermore cannot be Solomon alone, cannot be Israel alone. It is Christ. Spurgeon, treating the division of the psalm, writes that its close speaks with evident prophetic foresight of the glorious triumphs of the Messiah, David's seed, and the Lord's anointed. The psalm that began with one man's love ends by revealing the eternal love of God incarnate. One man loved God in the midst of the storm. God came down and delivered him. And that deliverance points forward to the eternal Son, the true one drawn out of many waters, so that every child of his might reach the large place of grace. Your praise is not meant to stay within 4 walls. Verse 49 is a missionary mandate dressed as a doxology. What God has done for you is far too great a news to keep to yourself. Psalm 18 has covered a long and luminous road. It began with the irrevocable love of a man for God, declared before any crisis had arrived. It walked through the densest anguish, where the cords of death and the snares of hell surrounded on every side. It watched God come down with cosmic power to draw one person out of many waters. It celebrated integrity, rewarded, and the perfect character of God, shining even through the most obscure paths. And it ended with a warrior clothed in grace, singing out loud among the nations. And the thread running through every block of this psalm is always the same: God did it. The love I declare, God planted it. The cry that rises, God hears it. The deliverance I receive, God accomplished it. The strength with which I fight, God girded me with it. The greatness I possess, the gentleness of God made it. So here is the practical invitation for you today. Take Psalm 18 and read it as a prayer this week. Work through it block by block as we have done together. Read it out loud if you can. In the block of the storm, bring your real anguish. In the block of the theophany, let the greatness of God stretch your faith. In the block of the doxology, do not stop before you reach the praise. And when you arrive at verse 46, pause for just a moment and say from the heart, "The Lord lives." Because the God who lit that flame in David's heart is still lighting flames, and the ones he lights, the enemy cannot blow out. If this study has touched your heart, do one simple thing right now. Click the subscribe button here on the channel. It is free, and it is the best way to continue this journey of Bible study together. Because there is still so much of the Psalter to explore, and Spurgeon has so much more to teach us. If you found the video valuable, leave a like. It helps the algorithm carry this content to other people who also need to hear that the Lord hears the cry. And if you know someone who is right now in verses 4 and 5 of Psalm 18, surrounded by the cords of anguish, unable to see the way out, share this video with that person. It may be exactly what they need to hear today, that there is a God who comes down, who draws us out of many waters, and who acts because he delights in those who are his. May the Lord bless your study. Until the next video.